My wife and her mom plotted to use me for a house and dump me, but I built a secret one and exposed their scheme in front of her ex. I met Eden at my cousin's party 3 years ago. She was there with a mutual friend and, honestly, way out of my league, the kind that turns heads when she walks into a room. We hit it off talking about some Netflix show we were both watching. I can't even remember which one now. We exchanged Instagrams. I figured she was just being nice and wouldn't respond when I DM'd her later, but she did. Our first date was nothing special, just coffee at that place downtown everyone goes to for their latte art or whatever. I was nervous as hell, but she seemed genuinely interested in me, asking questions about my family, my interests, stuff like that. She told me she worked at a dental office and lived with a roommate in one of those new apartment complexes on the east side. Things moved pretty quickly after that. Within 6 months, we were basically living together at my place, a small 2-bedroom I'd been renting for years. She'd stay over 5 nights a week, had her stuff all over, but kept her apartment because the lease wasn't up. That should have been my first clue something was off. She never invited me over, always had some excuse about her roommate being weird about guests. The first time I met her mom, Naomi, was about 8 months in. Eden had been weirdly dodgy about introducing me to her family, but finally set up a dinner at some restaurant where entrees cost more than I usually spend on groceries. The moment Naomi looked at me, I felt like I was being sized up at a cattle auction. She kept asking these pointed questions about my future plans and career trajectory while glancing at my watch. Just a regular Timex, nothing fancy. When Eden went to the bathroom, Naomi leaned across the table and straight up told me her daughter was used to a certain lifestyle that I should understand would be challenging for me to provide. I laughed it off, thinking she was making some awkward joke, but her face stayed dead serious. Then Eden came back, and the conversation shifted to some family vacation they took to Cabo. I told Eden later that night her mom seemed a bit intense. She just shrugged and said Naomi was protective because Eden's dad left them with basically nothing when she was 12. It made sense, I guess, so I didn't push it. Fast forward another year, and I proposed. It was nothing extravagant. I took her to the lake where we had our third date, got down on one knee with a ring I'd saved up for months to buy. She seemed genuinely happy, took about 50 selfies to post on her stories, and immediately called her mom, not her friends, her mom, while we were still at the lake. That's when things started getting weird. Wedding planning turned Eden into someone I barely recognized. Suddenly, everything had to be top tier, a venue that was booked out 18 months in advance. She mysteriously got us in with 4 months' notice, florists that usually only do celebrity weddings in the city, somehow on board. I kept bringing up budget concerns, only to have Eden tell me her mom was handling most of it so I shouldn't worry. But when the deposit came due, guess whose credit card got charged? Mine, every single time. When I'd ask about Naomi's contributions, Eden would get this look on her face like I'd just insulted her entire family and say something like, "Mom's organizing everything, that's her contribution, or she'll reimburse us after." She never did. My savings account got emptied, then my emergency fund. I even dipped into my land fund, money I'd been putting aside for years to eventually buy a piece of property outside the city. I never told Eden about that fund. That detail becomes important later. The wedding day arrived, and despite everything, I was excited. Eden looked amazing in her dress. The venue was admittedly perfect, and even my socially awkward brother managed not to say anything weird in his best man speech. Then it was time for the parent toast. My mom said some nice things that made me tear up a bit. Then Naomi stood up with her champagne glass, and I swear the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She started by saying how surprised she'd been when Eden brought me home, called me unconventional compared to Eden's previous boyfriends, mentioned how Eden had always been attracted to ambitious men, implying I wasn't one. The guests were getting visibly uncomfortable, with people exchanging those yikes glances across tables. Then she dropped the line that's been playing on repeat in my head for months. "This poor boy thinks he can provide for my daughter. Please, she's just using him until someone better comes along." There was this horrible silence. Then Eden laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an embarrassed laugh, a genuine laugh, like her mom had just told the funniest inside joke. I looked at Eden, waiting for her to say something, to defend me, anything. But she just kept smiling at her mom with this look they'd shared before, like they're the only two people in on some secret. My dad halfway stood up from his chair. He's old school and doesn't take disrespect well, but my mom pulled him back down. I just sat there, smile frozen on my face, as Naomi finished with some backhanded comment about enjoying the ride while it lasts before sitting down. The DJ, bless him, immediately cranked up the music and announced it was time for our first dance. Eden grabbed my hand like nothing had happened and pulled me to the dance floor. I was in shock, moving through the motions of our dance, while my brain tried to process what just happened. Eden kept whispering about how perfect everything was and how happy she was, while I nodded like a bobblehead doll. Later that night, back in our hotel room, I finally brought it up, asked Eden what her mom meant by that toast. She rolled her eyes and said I was being too sensitive, and her mom just has a weird sense of humor that doesn't always land right. When I pressed her on why she laughed, she got irritated and said she was just trying to smooth over an awkward moment. I let it drop because it was our wedding night, and I didn't want to start our marriage with a fight. But something had shifted inside me, a doubt that hadn't been there before, or maybe it had, but I'd been ignoring it. The honeymoon in Puerto Vallarta was weird. Eden was all smiles and affection when we were taking photos for her Instagram, but distant and distracted when we were alone. She was constantly checking her phone, and when I asked who she was texting so much, she'd get defensive and say I was being controlling. We came home and tried to settle into married life, but that little seed of doubt kept growing. Eden started talking about buying a house right away in one of those gated communities on the north side where all the doctors and lawyers live. When I pointed out we couldn't afford anything there, she said her mom would help with the down payment. Same story, different day. About 3 weeks after the wedding, I came home early because of a water main break at the job site. Eden didn't hear me come in because she was on the phone in our bedroom. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when I heard my name, I froze in the hallway. She was talking to her mom, laughing about how David has no idea, and Jacob says the market is perfect right now, and something about establishing residency first so the prenup doesn't matter. Jacob, her ex, the one she dated before me, who works in real estate, the one her mom always brings up as an example of Eden's usual type. I quietly backed down the hall, went outside, and then came in again, making plenty of noise. When Eden emerged from the bedroom, her phone was nowhere to be seen and she looked flustered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that conversation in my head, connecting it to Naomi's wedding toast, to all the strange little moments that never quite added up. While Eden slept beside me, I used her thumb to unlock her phone. She never changed her passcode after I caught her snooping through mine months ago. What I found made me sick. Texts with her mom talking about the plan, texts with Jacob that were way too friendly for someone who's supposedly just an ex, screenshots of my credit report that she'd run without my knowledge, research on divorce laws in our state regarding assets and property. They were playing me, had been from the start. The plan was apparently to use my steady income and decent credit to secure a mortgage on a nice house, establish residency, then divorce me for Jacob once the prenup timeline expired. In our state, the person who stays in the house during separation usually gets to keep it in the divorce, especially if the other person can't afford to buy them out. I wanted to wake her up right then and confront her, but something stopped me. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the sudden realization that I'd been living with a stranger for 3 years. Whatever it was, I decided in that moment to play the long game. See, what Eden and Naomi didn't know was that I wasn't as financially stupid as they thought. Yes, I'd spent my visible savings on our wedding, but that land fund I mentioned, it was actually way more than a fund. I'd already bought 5 acres outside the city limits 3 years before I even met Eden, paid in full, deed in my name only. I'd been saving to build on it eventually, but never mentioned it to her because, well, I guess some part of me always knew she wasn't as invested in our future as I was. The next morning, I acted completely normal, kissed Eden goodbye as she left for work, then called in sick to my job for the first time in 2 years. I spent the day making phone calls, first to a lawyer to understand my options, then to my buddy who runs a construction crew, and finally to my bank to secure my accounts. For the next few weeks, I played the perfect oblivious husband. I agreed enthusiastically when Eden suggested we start house hunting. I nodded along when she showed me listings way above our price range. I pretended to believe her when she said her mom would help financially. Meanwhile, I was setting a plan in motion that would give Eden and Naomi exactly what they deserved, the surprise of their lives. After that wedding reception disaster, I was in a weird mental place. You know that feeling when you're staring at your ceiling fan at 3 in the morning, watching it spin, and wondering how your life turned into such a mess? That was me, pretty much every night after hearing Eden laugh at her mom's speech. I kept going through the motions, though. Woke up, made coffee, went to work, came home, watched whatever Eden wanted on Netflix, went to bed, rinse and repeat. But inside my head, total chaos. Every time Eden texted someone and smiled at her phone, my stomach would twist. Every time she mentioned her mom calling, I'd suddenly need to take a shower or check something in the garage. One morning, about 2 weeks after that phone call I overheard, the one where Eden was talking to her mom about Jacob and the mortgage, Eden left her laptop open when she went to take a shower. I'm not usually the snooping type, but her Gmail was right there, and a new email from her mom had just popped up. The subject line? Next steps. I shouldn't have looked, but also, I absolutely should have looked. The email was basically a timeline. 3 months of playing house, her mom's words, not mine. Then start looking for houses in the right neighborhoods. Translation, places we couldn't afford. Get pre-approved for a mortgage using. My income and credit since Eden's was trash from maxing out credit cards her mom had helped her hide from me. Buy house, establish residency, file for divorce, keep house because I wouldn't be able to afford the payments alone. There it was, the whole plan, written out like some twisted project management timeline. And the kicker? The email ended with, Jacob says the market in Lakeside Manor is heating up, so we may need to accelerate. He's already found 3 listings perfect for you. Attached were the listings. I closed the laptop, made another cup of coffee, and just sat at our kitchen table for like an hour. I didn't even realize I was sitting in the dark until Eden came out of the bedroom and asked why I hadn't turned on any lights. That's when I decided to become the silent builder. See, I'd always been the type to talk through problems, communication, and all that. But what do you do when the person you're supposed to communicate with is literally plotting against you with their mom? You shut up and make your own plans. The next day, I called my buddy Beck, who runs his own small crew. We'd been friends since high school, worked together for years before he started his own thing. I told him I needed help with a special project and asked if he could meet me at my land that week. When Saturday came, I told Eden I was helping Beck with a bathroom remodel. She barely looked up from her phone, just said something about being careful not to mess up my back again. I grabbed my tools and left. Beck was already at my land when I pulled up, sitting on his tailgate, drinking coffee from his beat-up Yeti. He took one look at my face and said I looked like hammered crap. Always had a way with words, that guy. I didn't tell him everything at first, just said Eden and I were having problems, and I needed to figure out what to do with this property. We walked the land, and I showed him the foundation I'd already laid for what was supposed to be our future home. It was a good foundation, solid, properly done. I'd spent weekends getting it perfect, imagining Eden and me building a life there. Beck asked the obvious question, was I still building the house as planned? That's when I finally told someone the whole ugly truth. The wedding speech, the phone call, the emails, the entire scheme. Beck sat on a stack of lumber I had covered with tarps and just stared at me. Then he called Eden something that would definitely get this post removed if I repeated it, followed by telling me I needed to talk to a lawyer yesterday. He wasn't wrong. Monday morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years and went to see a lawyer my dad knew. The guy was semi-retired but still kept a small practice. I explained my situation, showed him the screenshots I'd taken of the email, played the recording of Eden talking to her mom about Jacob and the mortgage. The lawyer, let's call him Bernie, took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes like he was tired. He said he'd seen plenty of divorce cases in his time, but this level of premeditation was something special. Then he asked me what I wanted to do. That was the question, wasn't it? Did I confront Eden, file for divorce right away, try to salvage something that was clearly beyond saving? Bernie advised documenting everything, limiting financial exposure, and considering my options carefully. But while leaving his office, what stuck with me was something he said almost as an afterthought. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, but getting ahead. That's when the idea started to form. I went back to my land that evening, sat on my truck tailgate, and looked at that foundation as the sun was setting. This piece of earth was mine, fully paid for before I ever met Eden. The building permits were in my name only, and I knew every contractor, supplier, and inspector within 50 miles. The plan came together over the next few days. I'd build something all right, just not what Eden and Naomi were expecting. I pulled my crew together, guys I'd worked with for years who I trusted completely. I told them I had a personal project and needed their help on evenings and weekends. Everyone was in, even my boss, who'd been like a second dad to me since I started working for him at 19, offered to help with materials and equipment. For the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the clueless husband. I even started going along with Eden's hints about house hunting. Yeah, babe. That neighborhood sounds nice. Sure. I can ask about overtime to boost our down payment savings. Of course, your mom has great taste in kitchen countertops. Evenings and weekends, though, I was building what my crew started calling the Spite House. We worked like machines, got the framing up in record time. Plumbing, electrical, HVAC, all of it installed by guys who owed me favors or were friends willing to help for beer and barbecue. I called in every connection I had for materials, some left over from other jobs, some at contractor pricing, Some outright donated when people heard vague details of my situation. The whole time, Eden was getting bolder with her plans. She started casually mentioning that her mom had a friend in real estate, Jacob, though she never used his name to me. She began leaving mortgage calculators open on her laptop where I'd see them. Even started talking about which of our furniture would look good in a bigger place. One night, she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. A text from Naomi popped up that just said, "Jacob found the one, showing tomorrow." I took a picture of her screen, then set the phone back exactly where it was, added it to my growing file of evidence. The next day at work, my boss pulled me aside. He'd been helping coordinate deliveries to my land and knew most of what was going on. He asked if I was doing okay, and something about the genuine concern in his voice nearly broke me. I'd been running on autopilot for so long, anger and determination my only real emotions, that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to have someone genuinely care. I admitted I wasn't okay, not really, but I would be. I just needed to finish what I'd started. That weekend was when things came to a head. Eden announced that her mom had found the perfect starter home for us and wanted to take us to see it Sunday. I agreed, then casually mentioned I had a surprise for her too, something I'd been working on. Eden's face did this weird thing where she tried to look excited but was clearly suspicious. She asked what kind of surprise. I just said it was something big, something I thought would really show how much our future together meant to me. The look that crossed her face, a mix of triumph and barely concealed disdain, told me everything. She thought I was talking about agreeing to the house her mom had picked out, that I was finally falling in line with their plan. I suggested we make a day of it Sunday, see her mom's house pick in the morning, then I'd show her my surprise in the afternoon. She readily agreed, already texting her mom about the schedule change. That night, I lay in bed next to a woman I now realized had never loved me and felt strangely calm. The spite house was nearly complete. My lawyer had all the documentation he needed. I'd discreetly moved my important papers and family heirlooms to my parents' house over the past few weeks. Everything was in place. Sunday morning, Eden spent ages getting ready, like she was preparing for a photo shoot rather than a house viewing. We drove separately to meet Naomi, with Eden saying she might go shopping with her mom after. Fine by me. The house Naomi showed us was exactly what I expected, way beyond our actual budget, in a pretentious neighborhood full of identical McMansions, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, granite everything, on a lot so small you could hear the neighbors breathing. Jacob was there too, dressed like he was auditioning for a real estate reality show, all white teeth and firm handshakes. I played along, asking all the right questions about mortgage rates and property taxes. Naomi kept making little comments like, "Don't worry about the numbers, we'll make it work," while Eden gushed over the walk-in closets and soaking tub. After an hour of this charade, I checked my watch and mentioned it was time to head to my surprise. Eden tried to beg off, saying she was tired, but I insisted, "It's important to me. I've been working on this for weeks." Something in my tone must have gotten through because she reluctantly agreed. I suggested Naomi come too, and Jacob as well if he wanted. The more, the merrier for the big reveal. They all exchanged looks, confused but curious. Eden texted her mom something while I was talking to Jacob about the neighborhood, but eventually, everyone agreed to follow me in their cars. I led our little convoy out of the fancy suburb, through town, and toward the rural area where my land was located. In my rearview mirror, I could see Eden's face getting more confused the further we got from civilization. When we finally turned onto the gravel road leading to my property, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness for what could have been, anger at how I'd been deceived, but mostly anticipation for what was about to happen. As we crested the small hill and the spite house came into full view, I heard car tires skid on gravel behind me as Eden slammed on her brakes. I pulled up to the house, my creation, and parked, got out casually, and waited as Eden, Naomi, and Jacob slowly approached, their faces pictures of absolute shock. It wasn't at all what they were expecting. It wasn't what anyone would expect. And their reactions were about to make weeks of exhausting work completely worth it. The look on their faces was something I'll never forget, like they'd both simultaneously bitten into something sour while getting caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Eden recovered first, switching tactics faster than my old truck changes gears, which is to say, not smoothly at all. She went from deer in headlights to waterworks in about 2 seconds flat, started sobbing about how I was misunderstanding everything, how she loved me, how she'd never do anything to hurt me. Meanwhile, Naomi's face had turned this interesting shade of red, not embarrassed red, more like pissed off red, like, how dare I catch them in their own scheme. She started talking over Eden, saying I was being paranoid, that I was clearly unstable, "Look at this ridiculous house I'd built," she actually said. She even used the phrase, "You'll be hearing from our lawyer," which made me laugh out loud. I reminded her that in our state, we'd only been married for a few weeks, and I'd documented all of their scheming. Plus, I pointed out the land and this ridiculous house were purchased and mostly built before I even met Eden, with my own money, in my name only. It wasn't marital property. That shut them up pretty quick. Legal threats only work when you have legal ground to stand on. Eden tried a different approach, wiping away those fake tears and putting on her sweetest voice, the one she used to use when she wanted something expensive. She said we could work this out, that maybe she'd reacted badly to the house, but we could sell it and find something we both liked, that I was overreacting to a few harmless conversations with her mother. I just looked at her for a long moment. It was weird. A month ago, that voice and those eyes would have had me agreeing to anything. Now, I just felt nothing, maybe a little sad at how easily she could switch her emotions on and off like that. I told her simply that I wanted a divorce, that I had already spoken to a lawyer who was drawing up the papers, that she could keep the ring and whatever she'd brought into the marriage, but everything else stayed with its rightful owner. Eden's face did this thing where it started to crumple, then hardened when she realized the tears weren't working. That's when she got mean, started saying things about how I was never good enough for her anyway, how Jacob made 3 times what I did and wouldn't live in a clown house. Her words, how she'd been faking it in bed the whole time because I couldn't satisfy her. You know those moments in movies where the insults are supposed to cut deep and leave the hero devastated? This wasn't one of those. Honestly, I just felt relieved. Every nasty word out of her mouth just confirmed I was making the right choice. Naomi joined in, of course, said I'd trapped her daughter with my pathetic fantasies of building a life together, that I was just jealous of people with real money and class, that no woman with options would choose someone like me. I let them go on for a bit, partly because it was actually kind of fascinating watching the masks come off completely, and partly because they were saying all this stuff in front of my phone's camera, which was quietly recording the whole thing. My lawyer had suggested getting their true colors on video if possible. Mission accomplished. When they finally ran out of steam, I just shrugged and said it was time to go. Eden demanded to know if I was really going to make her live in that monstrosity until the divorce. I told her no, she could go back to our apartment, which was in my name, pack her things, and be out by tomorrow. She could stay with her mom or Jacob or whoever else wanted to deal with her. That set off round 2 of the shouting match. Eden insisted she had rights to the apartment. Naomi threatened legal action again. I reminded them that in our state, without kids and with such a short marriage, and with all the evidence I had, Eden would be lucky if a judge didn't make her pay me alimony for wasting my time. That was BS, obviously. No judge would award me alimony. But they didn't know that. I could see the wheels turning as they tried to figure out if I was bluffing. The drive back to the apartment was the most awkward 30 minutes of my life. Eden sat in stony silence in the driver's seat. Naomi kept trying to make phone calls in the back, probably to that lawyer they were threatening me with, but couldn't get signal once we left the main road. I just stared out the window, feeling weirdly calm. When we got back, Eden stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. Naomi told me this wasn't over, that they'd make me regret treating her daughter this way. I just nodded and said she should probably help Eden pack. I spent the rest of the day sitting on the couch, scrolling through Reddit, and occasionally answering texts from my buddy asking how the big reveal went. I could hear Eden and Naomi in the bedroom, alternating between angry whispers and the sounds of things being thrown into suitcases. Around dinner time, Eden emerged with red eyes and asked if we could talk privately. Naomi looked like she wanted to object, but Eden shot her a look and she backed off, saying she'd wait in the car. Once Naomi was gone, Eden sat beside me on the couch, closer than necessary. She wasn't crying anymore, but her voice was soft, almost like the Eden I thought I'd married. She asked if I was really sure about the divorce, said maybe we'd rushed into marriage without really knowing each other, that she was willing to try counseling if I was. For a split second, and I'm not proud of this, I wavered, not because I believed her, but because it's hard to just turn off feelings for someone, even when you know they've been playing you. Then she made a mistake. She reached out and put her hand on my thigh, letting it slide up just a bit, and said, maybe we could talk about this in the bedroom first, try to reconnect before making any big decisions. And just like that, the spell was broken for good. This woman, who'd been screaming at me 2 hours ago, who'd been plotting to use me and leave me, thought she could just sleep with me and make it all go away. Like I was so desperate, so controlled by my hormones, that I'd forget everything at the promise of sex. I moved her hand and told her the divorce wasn't negotiable, that she should finish packing and be out by morning, as agreed. Her face hardened again, all traces of softness gone. She called me a few choice names, said I'd regret this, the usual stuff. Then she stormed back to the bedroom. They left an hour later. Eden took more than just her clothes. I noticed a few small valuables missing, like the watch my grandfather left me and a pair of wireless earbuds I just bought. Petty, but not worth fighting over. Naomi didn't even look at me as they walked out, just kept her nose in the air like she was too good to acknowledge my existence. The apartment felt strangely peaceful once they were gone. I ordered pizza, cracked open a beer, and put on a movie I'd been wanting to watch that Eden had always vetoed. It was nice. Different, but nice. The peace lasted exactly 17 hours. I woke up the next morning to my phone blowing up with notifications, texts from friends asking if I was okay, DMs on Instagram from people I barely knew asking what happened, even an email from my old high school girlfriend saying she'd heard about the situation and was there if I needed to talk. Confused, I opened Facebook, and there it was. Eden had gone nuclear, a long post about how her husband of less than a month had abandoned her, tricked her into marriage under false pretenses, and built a spite house just to hurt her. She'd included a couple of pictures of the yellow monstrosity, taken from the car when we first pulled up, making sure to capture it from the worst possible angles. The comments section was wild. Most of Eden's friends were sympathetic, calling me every name in the book. A few seemed skeptical, asking for more details that Eden was conspicuously not providing. My mom had waded into the fray, defending me, until my dad apparently made her stop engaging with that nonsense. I closed the app without commenting. Let her have her social media moment. I had the truth, the evidence, and, most importantly, my freedom. But Eden wasn't done. Next came the texts, directly to me, alternating between angry demands that I fix this by giving her a proper settlement and tearful pleas saying she missed me and had made a terrible mistake. I blocked her number. Then she started showing up at my workplace, just happening to be driving by when I was arriving or leaving. Once, she brought Jacob along, the ex she'd been planning to leave me for, I guess to make me jealous. He looked uncomfortable, like he hadn't signed up for this level of drama. I almost felt bad for the guy. After a few days of this, I was getting pretty tired of the whole situation. My lawyer assured me the divorce was straightforward and would be finalized soon, since we had no real assets to divide and no kids, but Eden kept finding ways to drag things out, contesting every detail. What really changed the game was when Eden's friends started reaching out to me privately. At first I ignored them, assuming they were just going to give me grief on her behalf. But then one of them, a woman named Haley who'd been Eden's bridesmaid, sent me a long message saying she'd seen the real Eden and wasn't surprised by what happened. Turns out, Eden had pulled similar stunts with previous boyfriends. Not the marriage part, but the using guys for their money or status, and then discarding them. Haley had watched it happen multiple times and had finally gotten fed up with Eden's games. She offered to make a statement to my lawyer if needed. Then another friend came forward, and another. Apparently, Eden had a whole history of this behavior that her carefully curated social media presence didn't show. And her relationship with Naomi wasn't the loving mother-daughter bond they portrayed. It was more like Naomi was the puppet master and Eden the willing puppet. I didn't want to turn this into some big public drama, so I just thanked them for their support and passed their contact info to my lawyer in case we needed character witnesses. But knowing I wasn't the only one who'd been fooled made me feel a little less stupid about the whole thing. The most surprising call came from Jacob, the ex-boyfriend. He reached out through a mutual acquaintance, wanting to meet for a beer. Curious, despite myself, I agreed. We met at this dive bar on the edge of town where neither Eden nor Naomi would be caught dead. He looked nervous, kept checking the door like he expected them to burst in any moment. He said he wanted me to know he wasn't in on their scheme, that Eden had reached out to him after our wedding, claiming I was controlling and she wanted out. He admitted they'd hooked up a couple of times but swore he didn't know she was planning to use me for a house. He said once he figured out what was really going on, he cut things off, but Eden wouldn't stop calling him. Now he was afraid she'd try to use him the same way. I don't know if I believe everything he said, but he seemed genuinely rattled. We ended up talking for a couple of hours, comparing notes on Eden's manipulation tactics. By the end of the night, we weren't exactly friends, but there was a weird sort of brotherhood in both having dodged the same bullet. As Jacob was leaving, he mentioned something that caught my attention. He said Eden and Naomi had been telling people they were going to sue me for the yellow house, claiming Eden had contributed significantly to its value through her design input, even though she'd never seen it before that day. I laughed it off at the time, but the next morning, I decided it might be worth taking some extra precautions. I called my lawyer and asked what I needed to do to make absolutely sure Eden couldn't touch my property. He suggested a few steps to protect myself legally, and that's when I had an idea. A way to finally put this whole mess behind me and make sure Eden and Naomi couldn't twist the narrative any further. I made some calls, pulled some strings, and set things in motion. 3 days later, I invited a select group to the Yellow House: my parents, a couple of close friends who'd stood by me, Haley, Eden's former bridesmaid, and, on a whim, Jacob. I didn't tell them why, just asked them to meet me there at noon on Saturday. The surprise on their faces when they pulled up to the yellow monstrosity was priceless, but the real shock was yet to come. I'll tell you what happened next in the final update. This one's already running long, and I've got to head out. My buddy's waiting for me to help him fix his Wi-Fi router. Why do people always assume I know how to fix tech stuff just because I'm good with tools? But I promise, the conclusion is worth the wait. So it's been about 8 months since everything went down with Eden and Naomi, and I finally got some time to sit down and finish this story. My buddy's been bugging me nonstop to wrap this up. He's literally sitting on my couch right now playing Elden Ring and occasionally yelling, "Finish the Reddit thing," at me. First off, thanks for all the support on the previous parts. Reading your comments actually helped me process a lot of this stuff. Who knew internet strangers could be more supportive than your own wife? Anyway, here's how everything played out. After the big revelation, the days following the house reveal were weirdly quiet. Eden came back to the apartment that night after spending hours with her mom, processing what had happened. I was already there, calmly packing some of my things. She walked in looking tired and puffy-eyed and just stood in the doorway watching me. I kept folding my clothes like she wasn't even there. Finally, she broke the silence by asking where I was going. I told her I'd be staying with my buddy Beck for a while until we sorted things out. She nodded, like this made perfect sense, then hit me with something I wasn't expecting. She wanted to try counseling. Yeah, I know. After all the scheming, the lies, the literal plans to divorce me that I'd uncovered, she wanted to work on our marriage. I almost laughed in her face but managed to keep it together. I asked her why she suddenly wanted to save a relationship she'd been actively sabotaging since before we even said our vows. Her answer was interesting. She claimed she'd gotten caught up in her mother's expectations and plans, that deep down she did care about me but had been confused about what she really wanted, that seeing how much effort I'd put into building something, even if it was an intentional monstrosity, made her realize I was serious about our future. For about half a second, I almost bought it. Then I remembered the phone call I'd overheard, the way she'd laughed at her mother's cruel wedding toast, the credit check she'd run without my knowledge, the text with Jacob I'd seen on her phone. I told her counseling wasn't going to fix this. Nothing was going to fix this. I'd already filed for divorce, and the papers would be delivered to her tomorrow. Her face changed so fast it was scary. The tearful, repentant wife act vanished, replaced by cold fury. She told me I'd regret this, that no one throws away a relationship with her, that I was making the biggest mistake of my pathetic little life. I just shrugged, zipped up my duffel bag, and told her she had 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live since the apartment was in my name. Then I left while she was still screaming at me. The divorce itself was surprisingly straightforward. I had all the evidence of her deception documented and organized. My lawyer was excellent, a recommendation from my boss whose brother practices family law. Eden tried to contest it at first, making wild claims about emotional abuse and abandonment, but her lawyer must have talked some sense into her because they eventually agreed to a clean split with no alimony. The most satisfying moment came during the single mediation session we had. Eden's lawyer tried to claim that I had wasted marital assets by building the yellow monstrosity. My lawyer calmly pointed out that I had purchased the land before our relationship began, used primarily my own labor and salvaged materials for the construction, and that the property's value had actually increased, despite the unusual structure, because of rising real estate prices in the area. The mediator asked if I had any documentation of the property's value. I handed over an appraisal I'd had done the week before. Turns out, the land alone was worth nearly 3 times what I'd paid for it 5 years earlier. The bizarre house was actually a non-issue since any serious buyer would just demolish it anyway. The mediator actually smiled a little when he looked at the photos attached to the appraisal. Eden's face when she realized I was walking away with a valuable asset while she got nothing? Priceless. Probably the same look she'd planned for me to have when she eventually left me for Jacob after securing a mortgage in both our names. Speaking of Jacob, turns out he wasn't as invested in their little plan as Eden thought. About a month after I moved out, I ran into a mutual friend at the hardware store who told me Jacob had started dating someone else, a real estate client with actual money, not just schemes. Eden had apparently shown up at his office, having a full meltdown about it. and security had to escort her out. Naomi's reputation took a hit too. She'd always presented herself as this classy, wealthy widow who was just looking out for her daughter. But once word got around about what she'd tried to pull, and trust me, in our mid-sized city, word travels fast, people started connecting dots. Turns out, she'd pulled similar schemes before, encouraging Eden to date men with good financial prospects, then helping her extract whatever benefits she could before moving on. Nothing illegal, just deeply manipulative and unethical. Several women from Naomi's supposed friend circle quietly distanced themselves. Her standing invitation to the country club charity committee somehow got lost. She was still invited to events, but no longer seated at the good tables. As for me, life got better. Way better, actually. I moved in with Beck temporarily, but within 2 months I'd found a small place of my own to rent while figuring out my next steps. Work picked up. My boss gave me more responsibility and a decent raise after seeing how I handled everything. Turns out, emotional stability and not being actively scammed by your wife makes you more productive. Who knew? I decided to hold on to the land for now. My crew and I spent a few weekends demolishing the yellow monstrosity, which was oddly therapeutic, and cleaning up the property. I'm thinking of eventually building something. The house I'd originally planned, maybe, but just for me. Or maybe I'll sell it when the market peaks. No rush to decide. Dating again has been weird. I was upfront about my divorce with the first woman I asked out, expecting it to be a deal breaker, but she was surprisingly cool about it, said her sister had gone through something similar, and she understood trust issues. We went out a few times but didn't really click. I've been on a handful of first dates since then, nothing serious yet, but it's nice to be reminded that not every woman is running a long con. The most unexpected development came about 3 months ago. I was at Home Depot picking up supplies when I literally ran my cart into someone else's. I started apologizing before I even looked up and realized it was Haley, Eden's former maid of honor. Talk about awkward. She looked mortified to see me, and I was ready to just nod politely and escape down another aisle, but then she blurted out that she'd wanted to contact me for months to apologize. She said she'd known some of what Eden was planning, but not the full extent, and she'd felt horrible about it ever since. We ended up getting coffee afterward, and she told me she'd had a falling out with Eden about 2 months after our split. Apparently, Eden had expected all her friends to take her side automatically, and when Haley suggested maybe Eden should reflect on her own actions, Eden had gone nuclear and cut her off completely. Haley and I have become unlikely friends. Nothing romantic, she's engaged to a guy who seems genuinely nice, but it's been healing to talk to someone who knew Eden well and can confirm I wasn't crazy or paranoid. She's filled me in on some of the aftermath from Eden's side, most of which I wouldn't have known otherwise, like the fact that Eden and Naomi had to downsize to a smaller apartment because they couldn't afford their previous place without my income contributing, or that Eden had to postpone her advanced certification because she couldn't get approved for the loans, or that Jacob had apparently been stringing both of them along, never intending to be Eden's backup plan. Eden herself has tried to contact me twice, once through a mutual friend, asking if we could talk about what happened. I declined. The second time was more direct. She showed up at my new place unannounced, still not sure how she got the address. I was thankfully not home, but my neighbor told me she'd sat in her car outside for nearly an hour before leaving. I've heard through the grapevine that she's telling anyone who'll listen that I tricked her and wasted a year of her life. She conveniently leaves out the part where she was planning to use me for a mortgage and then leave. Classic Eden. Naomi seems to have accepted defeat more gracefully, if only because she's busy trying to salvage her social standing. Last I heard, she was heavily involved in some church group, playing the role of the devoted mother supporting her daughter through a difficult divorce. I'm sure she's already scouting for Eden's next target. As for me, life goes on. The house I'm renting has a decent yard where I've started growing tomatoes and peppers. My buddy's dog comes over to visit sometimes, and I'm thinking about getting one of my own. Work is steady, and I'm saving up again. I've started playing basketball on Thursdays with some guys from work. Nothing exciting, just normal life stuff that feels good after all the drama. Oh, and I did one more thing that felt important for closure. Remember the original plans I had drawn up for the house I wanted to build for Eden and me? I finally dug them out of storage, looked them over one last time, and then ceremoniously shredded them while drinking a beer on my back porch. Then I pulled out a fresh notepad and started sketching something new, something just for me. It's smaller, more practical, but with a killer workshop space and a covered deck for rainy days. No idea when I'll build it, but it feels good to be planning something that's not tied to lies or manipulation. I still have moments where something will remind me of Eden or the whole mess, and I'll feel a flash of anger or sadness. My buddy says that's normal, and it'll probably happen less as time goes on. He's probably right. 8 months isn't that long in the grand scheme of things. If there's any lesson in all this, I guess it's to trust your gut. I knew something was off from the first time I met Naomi, but I ignored it because I was so caught up in Eden. I ignored a lot of red flags because I wanted so badly to believe I'd found someone who genuinely cared about me. Next time, if there is a next time, I'll pay more attention to those little warning signs. The way someone treats waitstaff, how they talk about their exes, whether their actions match their words, all the stuff that seems small in the moment but adds up to who a person really is.